The woman with the golden hands. In a quiet village nestled between vast golden fields and towering baobab trees, there lived a woman named Nyah. She was not just any woman, she was the most gifted cook the village had ever known. No one could explain how she made her food taste so divine, but every meal she prepared was like a song of flavors, each bite richer than the last. People traveled from far and wide just to taste her cooking. Men would sigh in satisfaction as they finished their meals, women tried to copy her recipes but never quite matched her skill, and even children licked their plates clean. Nyah's small food stall in the village market was always busy. No matter how much she cooked, her pots were empty by midday. Some villagers called her Nyah the Golden-Handed, believing she had been blessed by the spirits of the land. Others whispered behind her back, saying no food should taste that good without a little magic. Nyah did not care about the whispers. She was a woman who had learned to ignore gossip long ago. She had no husband, she had lost him years ago under mysterious circumstances. Some said he had been taken by wild beasts. Others believed dark forces were involved. All that mattered to Nyah was her son, Boko. He was her pride and joy, the only family she had left. Every night, after a long day of selling food, Nyah would sit by the fire with Boko, telling him stories of the stars, the spirits, and the great ancestors. She always ended with the same words. Food is a blessing, my son. But it is also a responsibility. Boko would nod, though he was too young to understand the weight of her words. The jealousy of the village women. Not everyone admired Nyah's success. Some women in the village, especially those who ran food stalls of their own, hated her. They hated how their husbands praised Nyah's food, how their children ran to her stall with bright eyes, and how no one else could match her talent. One evening, a group of them sat in a circle, whispering angrily. "Have you ever seen her food go bad?" one woman asked. "Never," another replied. "She must be using something unnatural. No woman can cook like that without tricks," an elder woman muttered. And so, a dangerous rumor began to spread that Nyah was using forbidden magic to make her food taste better. At first, Nyah ignored the gossip. But as days passed, she noticed something strange. The villagers who once flocked to her stall now hesitated. Some whispered as they passed. Others looked at her food with suspicion. Even her most loyal customers began to avoid her eyes. Then, one night, something even stranger happened. The arrival of the old woman. The wind howled that evening as Nyah closed her stall. The streets were empty, but she felt someone watching her. As she turned to leave, a figure stepped out from the shadows, a bent old woman with piercing red eyes and a staff made of twisted wood. Nyah had never seen her before, yet something about the old woman made her skin crawl. "Nyah of the golden hands," the woman said, her voice soft but unsettling. "Do you truly not know why your food is so loved?" Nyah frowned. "I cook with love and skill. That is all." The old woman chuckled, a sound like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "Is that what you believe?" she asked. "That your hands alone have created such magic?" Nyah stood her ground. "I do not use magic." The old woman took a step closer. "Child," she whispered, "your food is not just food. It is something more. Something you do not yet understand. But soon, you will learn the price of what you have been given." Before Nyah could respond, the woman turned and disappeared into the night, leaving behind only the chill of her warning. Nyah shivered but refused to let fear control her. She would keep cooking, keep providing for her son, and prove the rumors wrong. Yet deep inside, a small voice whispered, what if she was right? The whispering shadows. The night after the old woman's warning, Nyah couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her small hut, her mind heavy with questions. Your food is not just food. Something you do not yet understand. The words echoed in her head like distant drums. She told herself it was just gossip and jealousy, that the old woman had been sent by her rivals to scare her. But deep inside, a fear began to take root. Nyah had never questioned her talent. She had always believed that her cooking was simply the result of skill, hard work, and love. But what if there was something else? Something hidden in her very bloodline? Rumors turned to accusations. The next morning, Nyah walked to the market as usual, her baskets filled with fresh ingredients. But the market felt different. People avoided her eyes. Women whispered behind their hands. Even the elders, who had once praised her, now looked at her with suspicion. Then, as she set up her stall, a group of village women approached. The leader was Mama Zula, an older woman whose food stall had been losing business since Nyah became popular. Nyah, Mama Zula said, crossing her arms. Tell us the truth. What do you put in your food? Nyah raised an eyebrow. Spices, meat, vegetables, nothing more. Mama Zula scoffed. Lies. No food tastes that good without tricks. The women nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with suspicion. I hear you whisper to the pots when you cook, one woman said. I saw a strange light in your store one night, another added. You use juju, don't you? Nyah felt her blood boil. I have never used magic in my cooking, she snapped. Do you question my hard work just because you cannot match my skills? Mama Zula stepped closer, lowering her voice. Be careful, Nyah. The village has turned on people for less. Nyah held her ground, but inside, her heart pounded. She knew the stories. In the past, women accused of using magic had been cast out. Or worse. Had her success painted a target on her back? A terrible warning. That night, Nyah sat by the fire with her son, Boko. He was only 12, but he could sense something was wrong. Mother, he asked. Why are people afraid of you now? Nyah sighed, placing a hand on his shoulder. Because they do not understand me, my son. Boko frowned. But they used to love you. Nyah's heart ached. Fear is stronger than love, Boko. And when people fear what they do not understand, they turn against it. Boko nodded, but he still seemed troubled. Then, he said something that made Nyah's blood run cold. Mother, I heard something today. Some of the boys in the village were talking about a story, about a woman long ago who had a gift like yours. Nyah's heart skipped a beat. What story, Boko? Her son hesitated. They said she cooked food that made people crave more. No one else's food satisfied them after they ate hers. But one day a man died after eating her food. Nyah's stomach twisted. What happened to her? She asked. Boko swallowed hard. The village accused her of using forbidden magic. They burned her alive, mother. The fire crackled between them, but the night suddenly felt colder. Nyah tried to speak, but her mouth was dry. Boko looked into her eyes. Mother, do you think it's true? Do you think our family has something unnatural? Nyah forced a smile. Of course not, my son. Now, get some sleep. But as Boko curled up on his mat, Nyah sat awake, staring into the fire. She could not ignore the feeling that the past was trying to repeat itself. The shadows speak. That night, Nyah had a dream. She was standing in her store, cooking as she always did. But something was wrong. The steam rose unnaturally, twisting into shapes, faces. They whispered in voices she could not understand. Then, suddenly, one of the faces became clear. It was the old woman with red eyes. Did you think you could escape your fate, Nyah? The woman whispered. Nyah tried to speak, but her voice was gone. The whispers grew louder, circling her, filling her ears like buzzing bees. Then, as suddenly as they came, the whisper stopped. The old woman's face smiled wickedly and said, "Your food is more than food, child. It is a curse. And soon, it will demand its price." Nyah woke up gasping, her heart racing. She looked at her hands, they were trembling. She ran to the corner of the hut and washed them over and over, as if she could scrub away the feeling of the dream. But no matter how much she washed, the feeling remained. Something was wrong. And for the first time in her life, Nyah was afraid of her own hands. The secret ingredient. The sun rose over the village, golden light stretching across the land. But for Nyah, the warmth of the morning did nothing to chase away her fears. Her dreams still haunted her, the whispering shadows, the old woman's eerie smile, and the words that felt more like a warning than a curse. Your food is more than food, child. It is a curse. And soon, it will demand its price. Nyah tried to shake it off. She had work to do. She had always believed in hard work, not superstitions. So she stepped into her small kitchen, ready to prepare the morning meal for her store. But something was different today. As she reached for the spices, she hesitated. She looked down at her hands, the very hands that had made her the most celebrated cook in the village. Had they really created something unnatural? Had she unknowingly been feeding the village a curse? Nyah shook her head. No, she told herself. This is just fear talking. And so, with trembling fingers, she began to cook as she always had. A visit to the elders. Later that morning, as Nyah set up her stall, she noticed that Boko was missing. She searched the market, asking the other vendors, but no one had seen him. Panic rose in her chest. Where was her son? Then, she heard a voice. Nyah. Come to the elder's hut. Nyah's stomach tightened. She ran through the village, her heart pounding. When she arrived, she saw Boko standing inside the elder's hut, his face pale. The elders sat in a circle, their expression serious. Mama Zula stood among them, arms crossed, a smug smile on her face. Nyah grabbed her son's shoulders. What is going on? The eldest of the elders, Chief Olo, cleared his throat. Your son has told us something very troubling, Nyah. Nyah frowned. What do you mean? The old man's gaze was heavy. Your son spoke of a story. A tale of an ancient woman who cooked food that no one could resist. A woman whose food became a curse. Nyah froze. Boko lowered his head, guilt flashing in his young eyes. I didn't mean to cause trouble, mother, he whispered. I was afraid. Nyah swallowed hard. Mama Zula stepped forward, her eyes filled with cold satisfaction. The villagers are not fools, Nyah, she said. They feel it too. Something is wrong with your food. Nyah clenched her fist. I have done nothing wrong. Chief Olo sighed. Perhaps. But we cannot ignore the whispers of the past. He leaned forward. Nyah, you must prove to us that your food is pure. You will prepare a meal here, in front of us, with ingredients we provide. If it tastes the same, then we will know your talent is natural. But if not, his voice darkened. We will know there is something else at work. Nyah's blood turned to ice. They were testing her. She had no choice but to agree. The taste of truth. An hour later, Nyah stood in the middle of the elder's hut, a fire burning before her. The villagers gathered outside, watching in silence. The elders gave her simple ingredients, nothing from her own stall, nothing touched by her hands before this moment. Slowly, she began to cook. She worked carefully, methodically, just as she always had. But something felt different. There was no familiar warmth in her movements. No joy in the stirring of the pot. When she was done, she served the food to the elders. They took one bite. Then another. And then, they stopped. A heavy silence filled the room. Nyah's heart pounded. Finally, Chief Olo spoke. "It is good." A breath of relief rushed through Nyah's chest. But then he continued. "Yet it is not the same." A murmur spread through the crowd outside. Nyah felt her world tilt. Mama Zula smirked. "There it is, then," she said. "The proof. Her food is different. And not because of skill, but because of something else." Nyah shook her head. "This is madness. You think my food is cursed just because it tastes better." But deep inside, doubt gnawed at her. Had the old woman been right all along? Was her food more than food? Was she unknowingly feeding the village something unnatural? A dark revelation. That night, Nyah could not sleep. She sat in front of the fire, staring at her hands. Were these hands blessed or cursed? Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through her heart. The fire flickered. And then, she heard it. A whisper. A soft voice, like wind rustling through leaves. "Nyah." Her blood ran cold. Slowly, she turned. The old woman with red eyes stood in the shadows of her hut, watching her. Nyah jumped to her feet, heart pounding. "What do you want?" she demanded. The old woman smiled, stepping closer. "To show you the truth." Before Nyah could react, the old woman raised a hand, and suddenly, the room shifted. The air grew heavy, and a dark vision unfolded before her eyes. Nyah saw a woman, one who looked like her, but from long ago. The woman was cooking, her hands moving with the same grace as Nyah's. People ate her food with devotion, eyes shining with obsession. But then, one by one, they fell to the ground, writhing in agony. Nyah gasped. "What is this?" The old woman's smile faded. "The truth, child. Your bloodline carries a gift and a curse. Your food is not normal. It binds people to it. Makes them crave it. Makes them need it." Nyah's knees weakened. "No," she whispered. The old woman nodded. "Yes. And now, the curse has awakened again, through you." Nyah stumbled back, shaking her head. "This is a lie. I have never used magic. Never." The old woman leaned closer, her eyes burning like embers. "Your food is not magic. But it is not natural either. It is something else. Something forbidden." Nyah felt the weight of the word settle in her chest like a stone. Was this why her food was different? Was this why the villagers were turning against her? Then, the old woman's voice grew even softer, more dangerous. "There is only one way to keep your success, Nyah." Nyah looked up, trembling. The old woman smiled. "You must make an offering. A sacrifice. If you do not, the curse will consume you." Nyah's breath caught in her throat. She knew what the woman meant. And for the first time in her life, she was truly afraid. Nyah could feel the weight of the old woman's words pressing down on her chest, suffocating her with a fear she had never known before. She wanted to deny it, to tell herself that her food was only food, that she was just a gifted cook, nothing more. But the vision she had just seen, the woman who looked like her, the people riding on the ground, craving more even as they suffered, it was too real to ignore. The old woman's red eyes burned into her soul as she stepped closer, her voice turning into a whisper that sliced through the silence of the night. "The time has come, Nyah. If you wish to keep your success, if you wish to keep the love of the village, you must make an offering. A sacrifice. Nyah's breath itched as she tried to step back, but the old woman's presence seemed to fill the room, making it impossible to escape. What kind of sacrifice? Nyah's voice came out hoarse, barely more than a breath. The old woman smiled, revealing crooked, yellow teeth. Something small. Something personal. A piece of you, to keep the balance. Just like those before you. Nyah's stomach twisted. The words felt dangerous, laced with something darker than she could comprehend. No, she said, shaking her head. I don't need this. I don't need magic. I have worked hard for everything I have. The old woman tilted her head, amused. And yet, without it, your food will never be the same. You saw the elders' faces today. They know. They can taste the difference. They will turn against you soon, just like they did before. Nyah's hands trembled. The villagers had already begun to whisper, to watch her with wary eyes, to doubt her. If she lost their trust, she would lose everything. The store, her home, even Boko's future, everything would crumble. The old woman saw her hesitation and let out a dry chuckle. You think you have a choice, child? You have already inherited this gift, this curse. It is in your blood. If you do not feed it, it will take something from you instead. That is how it works. Nyah wanted to refuse, to scream at the woman to leave, but deep inside, she already knew the truth. Something inside her had always whispered that her food was different. She clenched her fist, fighting the panic rising in her throat. What do you want from me? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The old woman reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small, dark pouch. A single strand, a piece of your essence. Just a small addition to your food. That is all. Nyah's blood ran cold. She knew what the woman meant. It was forbidden, unnatural. A shiver ran down her spine. This was why the woman in the vision had fallen, why the villagers had turned on her. But the thought of losing everything, of becoming an outcast, of having to watch Boko suffer because of her downfall, it made her chest tighten with dread. The whispers of the past were catching up to her, and she could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. Her hands trembled as she reached for the pouch, staring at it with horror. Could she do this? Could she cross a line that could never be uncrossed? She closed her eyes, the faces of the villagers flashing in her mind, their hunger, their admiration, their dependence on her food. When she opened them again, the old woman was gone. But the pouch remained in her hand, heavier than anything she had ever held before. Nyah sat in the dim glow of her small cooking fire, staring at the pouch in her trembling hands. It felt heavier than it should, as if it carried the weight of something unseen, something far older than herself. The old woman's words echoed in her mind, a chilling whisper that refused to leave her thoughts. Just a small offering. A piece of you. That is all. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows along the walls, making them dance like spirits waiting to claim their due. She clenched the pouch tightly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Could she really do this? Could she truly cross into something unnatural? Her hands shook as she loosened the strings, peering inside. A fine, dark powder rested at the bottom, its scent musky and unfamiliar. It smelled of earth, of something buried for too long. It sent a wave of nausea through her, yet something about it called to her, whispered promises of continued success, of admiration, of security. She thought of Boko, of the life she had built, of the villagers who had once adored her but now watched her with suspicion. Without my food, I have nothing, she told herself. The whispers were growing louder every day. It was only a matter of time before they turned into accusations, before she became another story told to warn children about what happens to women who are too powerful. Nyah closed her eyes, her breath unsteady. If she used it just once, Wouldn't that be enough? Just one time, to set things right. To silence the doubts. To make them love her again. Her fingers dipped into the pouch, and before she could stop herself, she let the powder slip into the simmering stew, disappearing into the rich, bubbling surface like it had never been there at all. A sickening feeling settled in her stomach, but she forced herself to stir the pot as if nothing had changed. The next morning, she arrived at her stall with a heart weighed down by dread, but the moment the first bowl was served, the transformation was immediate. The villagers who had been hesitant the day before now devoured her food, their eyes wide with delight. Some even licked their fingers, sighing in satisfaction, as if they had been starved of true flavor for too long. The whispers that had haunted her were suddenly gone, replaced by laughter, by praise. "Nyah, this is the best you've ever made," one man declared, wiping his mouth. "I don't know what you did, but your hands truly are blessed," another woman said, her eyes gleaming with admiration. Nyah forced a smile, but inside, she felt hollow. She had done what the old woman had asked, and it had worked. But at what cost? As the days passed, her business flourished beyond anything she had ever imagined. The lines at her stall grew longer, stretching beyond the marketplace. People came from other villages just to taste her cooking. Coins piled at her feet, her hands never rested, and the village once again worshipped her. But then, the changes began. Some of the villagers, the ones who ate her food most often, started to behave strangely. They needed her food. They came every day, their hunger never quite satisfied. Their eyes followed her wherever she went, filled with something deeper than admiration, something closer to obsession. If she ran out of food, they begged her to make more, some even offering their last coins just to taste it again. And then, one night, Nyah woke to a sound outside her hut. She crept to the door, her breath held tight in her chest. The moon cast long shadows across the village, but there, just beyond the threshold, stood 3 men. Staring at her. Their bodies were rigid, their eyes dark and empty, yet she could hear their shallow breaths, the faint sound of their tongues clicking against the roofs of their mouths. "Nyah," one of them rasped. "Please, just a little more." Fear gripped her throat. The hunger in their eyes was not natural. It was something else. Something she had unknowingly fed. Nyah slammed the door shut, pressing her back against the wooden frame as her breath came in ragged gasps. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs, her mind spinning in frantic circles. "This isn't real," she told herself. "They're just hungry. That's all." But deep inside, she knew that wasn't true. This was something far worse than hunger, this was need. The next morning, she opened her stall as usual, forcing a smile as the villagers swarmed toward her. Their eyes gleamed with something unnatural, something desperate. They no longer just wanted her food. They needed it. She barely had time to scoop each portion before hands snatched the bowls away, some trembling, others clutching the food so tightly their knuckles turned white. "Nyah, more," a woman cried. "Please, I'll pay anything." "I haven't been able to eat anything else for days," a man muttered, his lips cracked and dry. Another woman grabbed Nyah's wrist, her fingers digging in painfully. "Don't run out today," she whispered. I can't go without it. I just can't." Nyah yanked her arm free, her pulse pounding with terror. This wasn't admiration anymore. This wasn't success. This was a curse taking root. As the weeks passed, the symptoms grew worse. Some villagers wasted away, their bodies thinning even though they ate more than ever. Others grew restless, unable to sleep unless they had eaten from Nyah's stall. Children cried through the night, begging their parents to bring them more of Nyah's food. And then, one night, the first villager collapsed. A young man, barely in his 20s, had been standing in line for her food when he suddenly convulsed and crumpled to the ground. Foam bubbled at his lips, his body trembling like a leaf caught in the wind. The crowd backed away in horror as his limbs stiffened unnaturally before going completely still. Dead. A scream split the air. Nyah's breath caught in her throat. The villagers turned to her. It was her food. It had to be. Whispers erupted, their voices like a swarm of insects crawling beneath her skin. She's done something to us. This isn't natural. She bewitched us. She's feeding us something wrong. Nyah ran. She bolted from the market, her feet pounding against the dirt roads as the shouts followed her. Her vision blurred, panic clawing at her chest as she reached her hut and slammed the door behind her. She could hear the villagers gathering outside, their anger growing like a storm. "We must bring her to the elders," someone shouted. "She must pay for this." Tears burned Nyah's eyes as she pressed her hands to her ears, trying to block out the rising voices. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't supposed to happen. A cold laugh filled the room. Nyah froze. Slowly, she turned. The old woman with red eyes stood in the corner of her hut, her wicked smile stretching too wide. "Did you think there would be no price, child?" she cooed. Nyah shook her head violently, her body trembling. "You tricked me," she hissed. "You said a small offering. You didn't tell me it would turn them into." The old woman clicked her tongue. "And what did you think would happen? That you could feed them a piece of yourself without them craving more? Without them becoming bound to you?" Nyah's stomach twisted in horror. "Take it back," she whispered. "Undo it. Please." The old woman tilted her head, pretending to consider the request. "There is only one way to break the hunger now, child. Only one way to free them from your spell." Nyah swallowed hard. "How?" The old woman leaned in, her red eyes gleaming. "You must offer something greater. Something more permanent." Nyah's blood turned to ice. "Your womb." Her breath caught. "What?" "Your womb, child. The source of your gift, the bloodline of your ancestors. If you sacrifice it, the hunger will die with it. They will be free. You will be free." Nyah's knees nearly buckled. Her womb. Her ability to bear children. Her ability to ever give Boko a sibling, to ever create life again. She felt sick. "Choose quickly, child," the old woman purred. "Because if you do not, the village will decide your fate for you." Outside, the voices grew louder. "Bring her out. She must answer for this." Nyah looked to the door, then back at the old woman, her heart pounding in her ears. She had two choices. Offer her womb. Or face the wrath of the villagers, just like the woman in her vision. Either way, she was about to lose everything. The air in the village was thick with rage, voices rising like flames in the night. Nyah could hear them gathering, their footsteps crunching the dry earth as they closed in on her hut. There was no time left. The choice loomed before her: sacrifice a part of herself to end this nightmare, or face the wrath of a village that had already decided she was a monster. Tears burned her eyes as she turned back to the old woman. "If I do this, will it really end?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. The old woman smiled, slow and knowing. "Once the source is gone, the hunger will fade. They will be free. You will be free. But you will never bear another child, Nyah. That part of you will be lost forever." Nyah's stomach clenched. A deep sorrow washed over her, heavier than anything she had ever known. She thought of Boko, of the dream she once had of giving him a sibling, of building a family that would last for generations. But what choice did she have? The hunger she had created was destroying them all, turning the people she had once loved into something twisted and desperate. Outside, the villagers began pounding on the door. "Nyah, come out." She closed her eyes, breathing in sharply. And then, with trembling hands, she nodded. "Do it." The old woman's grin widened, and before Nyah could second-guess her decision, the air around them shifted. A sharp, piercing pain tore through Nyah's abdomen, a sensation so sudden and unbearable that she collapsed onto the floor. She gasped, gripping her stomach as a deep warmth spread through her body, her vision swimming. She felt something leaving her, something that had always been a part of her, her ability to create life, her connection to the lineage that had cursed her in the first place. The pain was unbearable, but then, as quickly as it had come, it stopped. A strange silence followed. Nyah lay panting on the floor, her entire body trembling. She felt empty. A part of her was gone, but in its place, there was peace. The old woman stood over her, eyes gleaming. "It is done." And then, just like that, she vanished. The pounding on the door stopped. Nyah sat up slowly, her breath ragged. She could still hear the villagers outside, but something had changed. The frantic, desperate voices, the wild hunger in their tone, was gone. Cautiously, she pulled herself to her feet and opened the door. The villagers stared at her, confusion and exhaustion lining their faces. Some blinked as if waking from a dream, while others looked down at their hands, at their bodies, as if seeing themselves clearly for the first time. What happened?" one man muttered. I feel different," a woman whispered. Their hunger was gone. The craving that had consumed them, that had turned them into something unnatural, had vanished. But as relief flooded through Nyah, she saw something else in their eyes. Fear. They didn't understand what had happened, but they knew it had something to do with her. Mama Zula stepped forward, eyes dark and suspicious. "She did something," she murmured. "And now it's over." But what did she do? A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Nyah knew the truth. She had paid the price to free them. She had sacrificed a part of herself to end the curse. But they wouldn't understand. They would never understand. And so, before they could decide what to do with her, before they could turn on her again, Nyah did the only thing she could. She turned to Boko, who had been watching silently from the crowd, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Come, my son," she said softly. And together, they walked away. Nyah left behind her store, her home, her reputation, and everything she had built. She did not look back, did not wait to hear what the villagers would say. The past had already repeated itself once. She would not give it the chance to do so again. The legend of Nyah lived on in the village for generations. Some said she was a witch who had cursed them all. Others said she was a woman who had paid a terrible price to save them. But the truth was known only to Nyah and the spirits that had watched over her. She had once been the woman with the golden hands. Now, she was just a woman who had survived.